On December 5th, 1872, a British ship called the Dei Gratia spotted something strange drifting in the Atlantic Ocean, roughly 400 miles from Portugal. A merchant vessel, sails half set, moving erratically with no one steering it. When the crew boarded to investigate, what they found made no sense. The ship was fully seaworthy. Its cargo, over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, was almost entirely intact. There was 6 months of food and fresh water still stored below deck. The captain's personal belongings were untouched. His pocket watch, his pipe, even a sewing machine with a half-finished dress still sitting on it, as if someone had simply stepped away mid-task. The ship's logbook had a final entry, written just 9 days earlier, describing calm weather and normal sailing conditions. Nothing alarming, nothing urgent. And yet, every single person on board, the captain, his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and 7 crew members, had vanished. 10 people gone. No bodies were ever found. No wreckage. No sign of struggle. The ship's only lifeboat was missing, suggesting the people aboard chose to leave deliberately. But why would 10 people abandon a ship in perfect working condition in the middle of the ocean with no emergency to explain it? More than 150 years later, nobody has a confirmed answer. This is the true story of the Mary Celeste, the most famous ghost ship in maritime history. To understand what happened, we need to start at the beginning, a routine voyage that should never have made history. In November 1872, the Mary Celeste departed New York Harbor, bound for Genoa, Italy. At the helm was Captain Benjamin Briggs, a highly experienced sailor with an excellent reputation, known throughout the shipping industry as cautious and reliable. This was not a reckless captain prone to risk-taking. Briggs had spent years at sea and ran a disciplined ship. Unusually for the era, Briggs brought his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, along for the voyage, a decision that suggests he expected the trip to be entirely routine, with no anticipated danger. The ship carried a crew of 7 experienced sailors and a cargo of 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, industrial alcohol used for manufacturing, not for drinking, since it was mixed with substances that made it toxic to consume. For the first several days, the voyage proceeded normally. Weather reports and the ship's own logbook confirmed calm seas and standard sailing conditions. The final logbook entry, dated November 25, 1872, recorded the ship's position near the Azores Islands. It noted nothing unusual, no storm, no illness, no conflict among the crew. 10 days later, the Dei Gratia found the ship abandoned, still slowly sailing itself through the ocean on a roughly correct course, as if the crew had vanished. Though the timeline suggested they had already been gone for over a week, it looked as if they had vanished only hours before. When the boarding crew from the Dei Gratia stepped onto the Mary Celeste, the scene they discovered deepened the mystery rather than solving it. The ship showed signs of minor water damage. Some water had gotten into the lower decks, and there was a small amount of standing water in the hold. But this was not unusual for a ship of that era and posed no danger of sinking. 6 of the 9 cargo hatches were intact and undisturbed. Notably, 2 barrels of alcohol were later found to be empty, though whether this happened before or after the crew's disappearance remains disputed by historians. The ship's single lifeboat, along with the crew's navigational instruments and the ship's papers, were missing. This detail is critical because it strongly suggests the crew left the ship deliberately. rather than being swept overboard or attacked without warning. Personal belongings, however, told a contradictory story. Sarah Briggs' sewing machine still held a partially completed piece of clothing. The captain's charts, tobacco pipe, and other personal effects remained in his quarters, seemingly undisturbed. If the crew had abandoned ship in a calculated, orderly fashion, why leave behind items a family would normally take, even briefly? Investigators at the time noted something else strange. A sword found aboard the ship appeared to have faint stains, initially raising suspicions of violence. Later chemical analysis, however, could not confirm these stains were blood, and the theory of a violent mutiny or attack was never substantiated by physical evidence. The ship's rigging was in poor condition. Some ropes were damaged or hanging loose, but not in a way consistent with a major storm or catastrophic damage. In short, this was not the aftermath of a shipwreck. A mutiny or a pirate attack in any form investigators could clearly identify. It looked, more than anything, like an orderly, hurried departure by people who fully intended to return. They never did. In the century and a half since the Mary Celeste was discovered, dozens of theories have attempted to explain what happened. We'll walk through the most credible ones. Theory 1, the alcohol fume explanation. The most widely accepted scientific theory centers on the cargo itself. The 1,701 barrels aboard the Mary Celeste contained industrial alcohol, and some of these barrels were later found to be empty. Some maritime historians propose that fumes from leaking barrels may have built up in the cargo hold. If Captain Briggs believed the ship was at risk of an explosion, ordering an emergency evacuation to the lifeboat, intending to wait at a safe distance until the fumes cleared, would explain both the missing lifeboat and the otherwise undamaged ship. If the crew then became separated from the ship, perhaps due to a sudden storm, rough seas, or a broken tow line, connecting the lifeboat to the Mary Celeste, they would have been left stranded in open ocean with no way to return. This theory is compelling because it explains multiple details simultaneously: the missing lifeboat, the empty barrels, and the ship's otherwise undisturbed state. Its weakness is that no direct physical evidence, such as scorch marks or confirmed fume-related damage, was ever conclusively documented. Theory 2, a sudden, violent storm. Some historians propose the crew feared the ship was sinking during a sudden squall, misjudging their situation and abandoning ship prematurely, only for the storm to pass and leave the Mary Celeste seaworthy while they remained stranded at sea in the lifeboat. This theory struggles against the fact that weather records from the region during that period do not indicate a storm severe enough to justify complete abandonment of a functioning vessel. Theory 3, mutiny or foul play. Early investigators seriously considered the possibility of mutiny, piracy, or violence among the crew. However, this theory has largely been dismissed by modern historians for a simple reason: there was no evidence of struggle. No signs of forced entry into cargo holds, no missing valuables, and no confirmed bloodstains. A crew intent on piracy or mutiny would typically have taken the ship itself, along with valuable cargo, not abandoned it entirely. Theory 4, sea monster and power theories. Over the decades, more sensational theories emerged, ranging from sea monster attacks to paranormal explanations. These theories gained popularity through fictionalized accounts, most notably a short story published years later by a young writer named Arthur Conan Doyle, who used the Mary Celeste as inspiration for a dramatized, entirely fictional tale involving mutiny and violence. Doyle's fictional story, though clearly labeled as fiction at the time, was so vivid and widely read that many of its invented details became mistakenly absorbed into public understanding of the real case, a clear example of fiction blending into historical memory. Modern historians largely dismiss the more sensational and paranormal theories, as they lack any supporting physical evidence and rely heavily on speculation rather than documented fact, the most likely conclusion. Considering all available evidence, most modern maritime historians favor a version of the alcohol fume theory combined with unfortunate circumstances. The crew made a fateful, ultimately fatal decision to briefly abandon ship as a precaution, only to become separated from it, with no means of rescue in the vast, empty ocean. But this remains an educated theory, not a confirmed fact. No definitive evidence has ever surfaced to prove exactly what happened aboard the Mary Celeste in those final hours. What happened to the Mary Celeste after its rediscovery is almost as strange as the mystery itself. The ship was recovered, resupplied, and returned to commercial service under new ownership. But its reputation as a cursed or haunted vessel followed it for the remainder of its operational life. Over the following years, the Mary Celeste changed hands multiple times, and by most accounts, proved consistently unprofitable and accident-prone. For each subsequent owner, a pattern some sailors of the era attributed to the ship's dark history, while others saw simply as a run of ordinary bad luck. In 1885, its final owner allegedly deliberately wrecked the ship on a reef near Haiti in an attempted insurance fraud scheme, a scheme that was ultimately exposed, ending the Mary Celeste story in disgrace rather than mystery. The wreck of the Mary Celeste was tentatively identified by researchers in the 2000s, though conclusive confirmation of the exact wreck site remains debated among maritime archaeologists to this day. Here's what makes the Mary Celeste different from almost every other maritime mystery in history. There was no storm severe enough to explain it, no pirates, no mutiny, no wreckage, no bodies. Just a ship sailing itself through open ocean, completely intact, as if 10 people had simply stepped outside for a moment and never came back. To this day, Mary Celeste has become shorthand in the English language for any place found mysteriously abandoned. Its occupants vanished without explanation. Captain Briggs, his wife, his young daughter, and 7 crew members were never seen again. No trace of them, or the lifeboat they escaped in, was ever found. Somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, on a calm day in late November 1872, 10 people made a decision that cost them their lives, and we may never know exactly why. If stories like this fascinate you as much as they fascinate us, make sure to subscribe, because the ocean is full of mysteries just like this one, still waiting to be told.